In the last video, I had mentioned how I have added this little board to my setup so that I have a secondary HDMI and a VGA output, and that I went out and grabbed this project from Samir that generates a true HDMI signal in Verilog, or System Verilog is what he's written that in. In that last video, I did show that, I've got this type of a block design, and I had created a little custom IP or custom component for this that really just all it did was take his code and run it with a little bit of a demo type of pattern. And that was something that looked like this. So on my output over here, I have these three outputs. This was the primary output. This was the secondary output using the true HDMI type of signaling. And then my VGA, I was just rotating through test patterns. And that all seemed to be working okay. But what I've done since then is something I mentioned in the last video. I'd like to be able to take, this, and instead of it all being hard-coded inside of it, whatever it's going to do, like a test pattern, it'd be nice to actually send data in that it could display. And I've made some good progress. I'm not done. What I'm going to walk through it's not to the point where it's fully usable, but I've made some good progress. So I'm going to walk through some of that and just talk through the pieces to give you an idea of what that's looking like. So maybe first things first, again, taking this source, I then wanted to wrap it, and the goal was to get to where I have a block diagram here in Vivado that looks like this. Now, if I zoom all the way back, for those that have been following the series of these videos I've been doing, I've really cleaned up. I know that it looks like there's a bunch of junk here, but I've really cleaned up this block diagram. I've trimmed out some unnecessary clocks and resets and just a bunch of stuff that I really didn't need. And I've trimmed things down to really all of this down here is the functionality you've seen in videos up to this point. And then there's a chunk over here that is what I'm now doing. So I've got my output signals for this HDMI secondary connector. I am now using a VDMA, so it's an AXI video direct memory access. And what that allows me to do is from PetaLinux to be able to write data to it. And that data now can be sent out of my board through that HDMI secondary connector. With that, I've got to do some things about making sure all my resets are synced up well, my clocks are set up correctly. So there's some other, like this little clocking wizard is generating the appropriate timing clocks I need for HDMI. And then one of those clocks I use to drive a lot of other stuff like you see up here on this VDMA. But what I'll point out, and I'll go through this quickly, is that I now have this component that I built in a separate project. So the separate project took what was done over here by Samir, which is really this HDMI and all these files underneath. I modified it a bit. So I did some adjustments in his top level here, or he didn't call it top, but this HDMI module. I wrapped that with some additional functionality in System Verilog, and then to make it so I can add it into a block design, you've got to wrap it with a Verilog. So I've got a Verilog wrapping a System Verilog. System Verilog is leveraging the HDMI work that he had done. But what I did in my highest level here, this wrapper, is I added in what was necessary as an AXI4-Stream slave interface. Because what I want to be able to do is, come up here and grab pixel data from this direct memory access DMA for video and bring that pixel color data over, and then of course get it out as HDMI. And this is how I am pulling that. Now, in addition to that, I had to add other things. For example, I'm using the VSync, the vertical sync signal coming out of this to synchronize the VDMA. So going back, you're going to see things like my VSync is coming out of that and going into the DMA, because in the DMA, I'm telling it I want it to be a slave when it comes to how it synchronizes frames and where to pull those signals from. And so basically I'm using that one VSync to synchronize this content. I'm also generating a clock with the appropriate 74.25 megahertz for the resolution I'm generating, which is a 720p 60 output. And all these clocks are particular to use that same thing. You know, I've come in here and I've experimented with different line buffer depths, and you can see all the values I'm using, but all of this is what you're going to see the output of here in this video, is the way I've got this configured. But the short of it is I now have my Zynq, and then through the help of this little smart connect, I can then tap into this video direct memory access up here. And as this all starts to come together, now I can, from Linux, actually access this as a Framebuffer device. And I'll show that when I get into PetaLinux here in a little bit. But I can now write pixel data to that and then stream it over here to this to generate the HDMI output. Now that by itself was part of the challenge, was getting all of that figured out and hooked up. In addition to that, I had to update my DTSI file. So this would be for PetaLinux. And in the DTSI, I've done things like, you know, reserve some memory for the frame buffers, if I did that correctly. If I keep scrolling down, I've had to come in here and reference a new driver that I wrote. And I thought this was going to be a little bit more difficult than it was. But if I go into my PetaLinux, I created a module, or a driver essentially, that really makes it so that I can access that VDMI from PetaLinux. And so what I did is I looked at the Digilent one and basically modified that, and really just, I kind of stripped it down because I'm not using a timing controller. I don't support flipping resolutions on the fly. I'm really just saying I'm going to support 720p output and call it good. So I put that in there. I just said I'm going to use an HDMI as an endpoint on this. I am leveraging this programmable logic, little Zynq driver that I have included here, very much like my primary HDMI output. And then I had to set up the VDMA, which I did that here. And so I've got my DTSI filled out. That seems to be working so far. So I've added the driver. I created a new, or updated the DTSI, and then I created a new image for PetaLinux out of all of that. And then that gets me to the point where I can now actually boot up into PetaLinux. Now, if I come over here, I have this window here, which is just a terminal. I'm terminaled into this. So I have a USB-C cable coming in down here. And the window that you see right here is me just connected to that. So, and then I also have some capture windows up. And so all three of these outputs I'm capturing, and I'm just using OBS, but let me get all of these pulled up here so you can see them. And get this one maybe down out of the way. So this primary output right now, it's up and running already, but this primary output is giving me this window here. And so this would be this Wayland Weston user interface. And then my VGA output is just this little, test pattern that's still running. This is all programmable logic. I'm not doing anything with it yet, other than just letting it run a cycle of test patterns, same as the last video. And then this window is capturing the output of this HDMI up here. So I'm going to get rid of this one, just minimize it. We don't need to see that one. This is my secondary, and this is my primary HDMI. And those are the ones that I'm going to be working with here as I step forward here. And maybe I'll just set this up in the corner for now. and I'm going to come back to this. So now what I have set up is that when I boot up the system, and let me point out one more thing in my DTSI file, I configured it with a second. So I had my first HDMI set up here. I connected and configured a second HDMI connector. So it's A-2. Both of those are 720p 60, 32 bits, so ARGB type of setup for color. And I told it I want the second output to be my console. And that means that when I go up here, the second output should be this one. That's what I want it to be. So this is my first, this is my second. Make that be my console output. And then I also configured the system through Weston to say that this is the output that I want to display the user interface on. So the intention is that when I boot up the system, I'll see it boot to this output, and then it'll flip over to the user interface, this one over here, this graphical user interface, and that'll come out of this output. Now, if I have these windows like this, maybe what I'll do, I need to do some rearranging again, but I will leave this one up here kind of small. It's just a graphical interface. You'll get the point. And this will be my new HDMI, true HDMI signal output. And I think what I'm going to do is I'm just going to tell it to restart. Sorry, reboot. And I'm going to talk about a couple of things. One, this scrolling. I'll talk about that momentarily. But my system is booting up. And as it's booting up, then it should be treating this as my console output. And so it's going to get to some point at which it's going to say that the system is starting. And there you can see that, PetaLinux sees it. It's outputting saying, please wait. It's booting. That's the same type of output you've seen in previous videos. It's just it was on my other HDMI. And then at some point then it says, okay, I want to load up Weston. And that's going to show up here momentarily. And there it comes up. So I've got this was my secondary output. It showed the console as it was booting, and then once Weston comes up, I told it to load up on this one, just so I could see both monitors working in the system simultaneously. Now, if I come up here, I can also do things like, and I've got to grab my other mouse and keyboard here because this is the output I need to use the local keyboard on. So I'm going to grab that mouse. And I'm going to just open up a little console inside of here. So I'll open up this little X terminal emulator. And some of you that have watched previous videos, I had written a little utility for Linux that's just called FB test. And so I can do an FB test and it tells me, okay, version whatever, 0.004. And if I want, I can do things like show config, or I can do a test. But from here, I'm going to say, well, I want to run test 1. And when I had written it, I had made the option so you could tell it which frame buffer to show it on. Let's see if I can open another one of these. I guess I haven't tried this, but let's see. Yep. So if I go in just for a second and I go to dev, you're going to now see I have a couple of frame buffer devices. I now have FB0 and FB1. So before I only had FB0, I could never get FB1 to show up. I now have FB1 working with this setup I have now. And that means that when it comes to this little utility I wrote, I can either just press enter and use FB0, which is the user interface that's running on that HDMI output, or I can say I want to do the test on FB1. And what you'll see now is when I run that, it's running my code from way back when on the other monitor. And so that's using that HDMI output. So from Weston on PetaLinux, I'm using a previous program I wrote many videos ago, and I'm writing to the frame buffer, and you can now see that that is working over here on this other screen. Now it's not working entirely right, and I'm going to show that in a second about what's not working, but generally it's working here. I could also do test 2, and test 2 is where I just animate some sprites across. So I'll say, well, go out and do FB1 again. And if I switch to my other mouse, you can see I've got this little set of 3 sprites just running across the screen. Really boring stuff, but it was just one of the very first things I had done, just as a simple way to see if I could write to frame buffers, was those following color bars and these 3 characters. And then I had one that loaded up a little, photo type of thing. But you can see that that's all working fine. Now up here, this user interface is working fine. This down here is mostly working. Now what's not working correctly is it's offset horizontally. It's in the wrong spot. So if I go out and run this bars one again, those bars are supposed to be in the center. So they shouldn't be over here. They're offset to the left for some reason. And I haven't been able to figure out why yet. And so I'm sure it's a timing thing. It's where's my pixel clock relative to the FIFO, that buffer I've got, or there's something else I haven't quite figured out. And there's some weirdness, and it might come down to a Linux driver, the PetaLinux driver. And I say that because let me do this. If I just get out of this user interface up here, so I hit Control Alt Backspace, it says close out that UI. You can now see over here, and I'll make this big, that I'm back to the console on that output. I can log in, but see, once I start doing some stuff, and sometimes it lasts longer before it does this, it just starts this horizontal scroll. It does it for, I don't know, 15, 20, 30 seconds, and then it stops and it won't do it again, but it's offset. It's not where it should be at. Those bars, when they drop, are acting like they're using, this positioning right here. So I'm going to log in, and you'll just have to pretend this doesn't look as bad as it does. So here, this should be right here, should be over here, but the whole thing is pushed off to the right. And I've yet to determine where that is coming from. Let's see, I think I mistyped my password. I'm going to have to do that again. Okay, so now I'm logged in, and I can do an FB test from here. I'll do test 1. And Framebuffer 0 is the other output, which I'm not using right now. So I'm just going to say dev FB1. There's my tests. If I want to do test 2, let's see, FB test 2 dev, FB1, that would help. There's my little animated sprites. And that's all running on that from the console directly on this. And I can pretty much do anything other than it's offset. Like if I do a nano right now, nano just looks like a mess, So because it's all shifted off, not where it's supposed to be. So let me clear that. Now what I can do, a couple of things. If I don't want it to jump right into Weston, I can maybe just have it boot to the console. And maybe what I'll do, an easy way for me to do that is I'm going to go into the init folder, and in that folder, one of the files down there's 2 files I'm looking at. There's a Weston and there's an X server. So I still have my image trying to load X server. It's never worked. I always get the same error that I've gotten, and I've talked about that in previous videos. And I've got Weston. But what I might do is I'll clear this just so it's up top so you can kind of see what I'm doing. But I'm going to do a chmod, and I'm going to take away the execute for Weston, so that when I reboot it, and I'll have to do a sudo on that. So I just set it so that it's no longer executable, and I'm going to do a reboot, sudo reboot. And the system's going to reboot, and while it's doing that, I can see back here it's scrolling through everything on the boot up. But now it should come up to a login prompt here, at a console and not even take me into Weston. Now back here, while it's doing that, I'll pull this down so you can see it. Well, this is interesting right here. You can see that the Digilant driver is loading, and then here's my driver loading, and connected into the DRM. And I can scroll back up here, switch into the console on my device. So it's finding both displays. It's connecting the right driver. All that stuff is working well. So here I am back here. You notice it looks good. I can log in, and then there it started going off to the side. So that's interesting, that behavior. And again, it'll scroll for a little bit, then it's going to stop and it'll be fine. Now I've gone back and I've been digging. It's got to be some timing thing or some buffering thing in PetaLinux or something. And so I've been putting a lot of energy into just making sure I've got all of these clock domains, I got things synchronized well. But I have yet to track down why it does that and why it lands on a weird spot. Now it's interesting, if you see this behavior now, let's say I do a listing, I'll just go out to the user bin folder. I can see all kinds of stuff there. I can clear this, but I'm going to go back over here and change back to Etsy inetd, and I'm going to also disable, and let's see, what was it? X server. So I'm going to do a chmod and make that non-executable. And I'm going to reboot. And it seems like now I'm going to get a different behavior. I see a few different behaviors. If I don't try to load the X11, Xorg stuff, I see one behavior. If I don't try to load either of the graphical environments, I see a different behavior. And so that just tells me that, maybe it's not all in Vivado that I need to do some fixes. There could be some coding things or PetaLinux things, DTSI things, something that I haven't tracked down yet. But now I'm going to log in PetaLinux, and now I can see that I've got some garbage showing up at a different point. I'll get garbage that shows up like at this point. I can see the timing, the buffering, something is way off. But that's different behavior than when I had loaded or tried to load the X server. So here I can do a clear. I can run nano. The top of it looks fine, but then the rest of it doesn't look good. And I'm going to get out of that. And so I might come back in here and do a couple of things. Maybe I will have it inetd. I'm going to tell it that I want to let Weston run again. And I've got a little script that sets up my machine with some configuration information. But one of those things that it does is sets up the Weston INI to have my monitor details, things like that. So I just ran that real quick. But I'm rebooting again. And again, you'll see that it should say it's booting here, and then it should kick up Weston over here in the other monitor. Now it's interesting, sometimes the order that it detects my two screens is backwards. I'm assuming somewhere in PetaLinux you can control that. But if I ever run into that, I just reboot again, and then it typically finds the Digilant one first and mine second. But it's interesting, when I'm in Weston from the terminal, I can access the other screen and I don't get that scrolling. It's just off. It's already off. As far as the horizontal offset, it's not in the right spot. So maybe while this is booting up, things I have to do is obviously I've got to track down where and why am I getting that scrolling effect and things not quite where they should be. So, the things that come to mind, of course, is how am I tracking the X position, the Y position? How do I use this FIFO buffer? How is all the timing brought together? So a lot of things I've been looking through, but just haven't pinned down the exact thing that's causing this issue yet. I'm going to jump out of this up here. And see, like right now, nano looks great, so that's what it should look like. Now, as I'm talking, I'm not going to touch anything, but I imagine it's going to start scrolling here. Yep, there it goes. So it's like it's a clock stability issue, and that's what I've just got to track down. But for a little bit there, it looked good as I got out of Weston back out to the console. And now it's off to the right and it's messed up. And actually I'm still in nano, so get out and then I can do a clear. And then I'm here again. I was going to say the things I have not done yet, of course, no audio. I need to get this this horizontal offset scrolling problem identified and fixed first. I haven't been able to get Weston to load up on both screens, and I don't know if I'm going to be able to do that. There might be some other limitations or other things in PetaLinux that are needed to make that work, but I might dig into that at some point. This system's not going to have enough horsepower anyways to drive two screens without hardware acceleration, so if I can make it work, it'd be just for the fun of it. It's not going to be at all usable. I think those are the next couple of things on my list. So it's really get the scrolling fixed. It's then add in some audio support, and then maybe see if I can do some more active, both screens working, doing something simultaneously. And you saw that from Weston, I can manipulate the second screen without any problem. Or if I change around which of my screens is the primary, I could then also write out to the secondary. Using, for example, that little test tool that I wrote, or some program that allows me to specify the frame buffer. But I think that's it for now. A little past half hour into this, I just thought I would kind of share some of the progress I'm making. I think for me, it's good progress. I've got the AXI4-Stream data flowing into it. It's working kind of, and I think it's going to end up being something silly at the end of the day when I can figure out what that horizontal scrolling is. But until I get that done, it's kind of not working quite right. So more detective work ahead of me, and I'll see if I can't make some improvements to this.